The Icc T20 World Cup is officially starting from today itself, the 1st of June. So yeah, it's a really tough competition because a total of 55 matches will be played across 9 different venues within 29 days. So it will be action-packed. So let's see what day one have in store for us. Well, day one starts with the first match of the tournament being played between the rivals, the host country of United States, and they will be playing alongside, with their rivals, Canada. You could say the rivals because it goes on with the other sports. So let's say cricket joins in as another sport, and the historic significance of this match is really great because incidentally USA and Canada played the first official international match ever recorded in history of cricket, so it will be an important match. And to watch the match, tune in to Hotstar, and if you have the Star Sports channel, that will be great also. To watch the match, you'll have to tune in at 6 a.m. IST on the 2nd of June, with the match officially starting at 7:30 p.m. local time. Well, the action then shifts to the West Indies, with West Indies taking on Papua New Guinea at the Providence Stadium in Guyana, with the match starting from 8 p.m. IST on the 2nd of June 2024, and the local time being 10:30 a.m. So yeah, it will be a cracker of a contest, and that concludes day one. So you can't call any favorites in the first match because it's a really tough competition and it's really hard to call, but USA with the likes of Corey Anderson and a moral boosting series win over the Canada in the 4-match series, which they won, and they also beat the Asian country Bangladesh recently, so their confidence should be high, and since they're playing at home, we are backing United States to take this one. And the second match will be against the West Indies and Papua New Guinea, so it's also not that easy to choose because you are not quite sure how Papua New Guinea will play. But still, I think West Indies right now have the firepower to do the job for them, but I'm not sure because their bowling looks a little thin.